Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Franny Noble, and I am a specialist for knowledge management and website development here at Save the Children. And I specifically support knowledge management and the website for IDELA. For those of you who were able to join us last week for our report launch for Beyond Access, thank you for attending, and thanks for coming on to another webinar in such a short timeline with IDELA again. We're really excited to introduce you to this community of practice, as well as a panel of people from across the globe who are currently using IDELA. A few notes before we get going. Number one, our attendees, those of you joining us today, will not have audio. And this just makes the webinar a bit cleaner for everyone. But if you do have any comments using the Zoom toolbar, you can find the chat box, and you are welcome to send comments to the group that way. And you can also ask questions that way. We will be monitoring that chat box throughout. Secondly, you'll notice that you already have a number of people on video that you can see on your screen in addition to the PowerPoint. Those are our panelists who we will be introducing shortly, as well as my colleague at Save the Children, Fabiola Lara. She's joining us from Los Angeles today. Fabiola is a specialist for early childhood care and development, and she works closely with IDELA. And lastly, today's webinar will be recorded. It will be available on our website within about 48 hours. So if you need a refresher on anything that we cover, or if you want to share it with colleagues, it will be up there for indefinitely. So there'll be a good resource to return to if you need it. Our agenda this morning begins with a review of the community of practice and the ideas behind it. What was Save the Children thinking when we developed it? Where are we coming from? What are our hopes for this space? And that will be led by Fabiola. I'll then take over presenting again, and we will review the site itself, what it looks like, its main functions, how it's structured, and how you can begin to get involved right away. And then we're going to go into our panelist introductions. We'll let you know where each of them is from. They'll tell you a bit about themselves, and we'll also be able to join in a discussion about how they see themselves using this new community of practice and how their involvement with IDELA could come through the community of practice in the future. Finally, we're going to have a few polls, a few questions for our audience so that you can be a little bit more involved, and we'll also take questions. So again, feel free to post your questions in the chat box throughout the session. We'll be monitoring them throughout, but our primary Q&A and the discussion that follows will be at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Fabiola.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I just want to take the time again to thank you for joining us for this webinar today. As Franny said, my name is Fabiola Lara, and I am an ECD specialist with Save the Children US. I currently support a number of countries, largely in the West Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean regions. Part of my role includes providing technical assistance to our country offices as well as external partners. And this also includes training around IDELA. So what is IDELA? I know that most of you are familiar with the tool or you're already currently using the tool, but just to quickly recap, IDELA is an open source, easy to use, rigorous tool that is used to measure children's learning and development, children between the ages of 3.5 and 6. IDELA covers 4 developmental domains: motor development, socio-emotional development, emergent literacy, and emergent math. And IDELA can be used in a number of ways. It can be used for program evaluations, for randomized control trials. It can also be used as a national assessment for a school readiness assessment upon entry into grade 1. And it can also be used as for national monitoring of ECD programs, answering any questions around the effectiveness of ECD programs and systems. So what does the IDELA community look like? Well, IDELA is currently being used in over 55 countries. This includes partners outside of Save the Children, as well as our country offices or our Save the Children partners. The countries colored in red are Save the Children partners. The ones in yellow are joint partnerships between Save the Children and another partner. And the ones in blue are external partners. So partners that are not part of Save the Children. And every day this demand for use of IDELA grows. The growing number of IDELA users includes everywhere from academics, university partners, implementation partners, governments and ministries, as well as donors. Why launch a community of practice around IDELA? Well, as you saw in the previous slide, the number of IDELA users continues to grow. And with that, the demand for a space where partners can engage in ongoing conversations around IDELA use has also increased as countries are in need to connect with each other, and especially if they're within the same regions or they know of a different partner that has more experience using IDELA. And additionally, the thinking around this community of practice was really to create an open source space. And when I say open source, I think Franny earlier in one of our conversations put it very well. Even President Obama can use this. So anybody really, IDELA users, non-IDELA users, can really contribute to this community of practice. And really the idea was to allow for enhanced knowledge sharing practices, and of course working toward generating stronger evidence to help build a stronger case for young children. Where can this community of practice be found? Well, it has been developed and it's currently integrated into the IDELA website, which some of you might be familiar with. I won't go too much into detail as to how to access it because Franny will provide you with that information, and she'll also tell you any key features that you need to know before accessing it. And finally, some key functions of the community of practice. As I just mentioned, it's an online community of practice that is very much integrated into the IDELA website, and allows for really continuing the discussion around IDELA between different partners, different users, and even non-users again. A key function of this community of practice will also be weekly and bi-weekly posts that myself and others from the technical team and as well as our research team will be able to make. And this includes questions to the group. Users, IDELA users, as well as non-users are also encouraged to post questions. And again, this would allow for, you know, if you have a neighboring country that would like to see the tool, maybe it was translated in the same language and some adaptations need to be made, that this will be a great place to check out. It will be constantly monitored. So this allows for us to also respond to any requests or any questions that we see that are popping up quite a bit or pretty frequently. So overall, this will be a really great way for everyone to engage. And then finally, we have some quarterly webinars that are planned over the next year or so. Franny will be providing some more information as to what those webinars would look like. They would be covering a wide range of topics, and we would really appreciate your suggestions as to what you would like to see covered in these webinars. So now that we've talked about what the community of practice is and the different functions, I'll hand it off to Franny to give us a tour and demonstration. Take it away, Franny.
Thank you, Fabiola. I am still really excited every time I see that map, and I'm actually the one who designed and updates that map, and I still get excited when I see it, when I realize how far IDELA's reach is going. So I highly recommend, if you're a visual person like myself and want to see more of that type of information that Fabiola presented, I'll be sharing some links in the chat box. You can go. I obviously want you to go visit the community of practice, but there's some great visual representations on our website as well. I'll link you to those. But back to the community of practice. I want to lead you quickly, not quickly, but fairly quickly through a very brief overview so that you can get a sense of what we're actually talking about when we say community of practice. And to note, I did consider doing this live and sharing my screen on a web browser, but I know part of our goal with type of webinar was to have as much international participation as possible. And I can tell you that based on the registrants, we are looking at a very international audience. And I know that internet connectivity can still be an issue. So I decided not to do more of that live kind of presentation, in the hope that sticking with PowerPoint would enable the most amount of people to see it properly. One moment here. Okay. All right, well, this page should look familiar. Fabiola just shared it as well. And I want to point out two things here. Number one, this is the homepage of our website. So if you have not explored IDELAnetwork.org, I highly recommend you spend some time on there. It is filled with fantastic resources that are coming in from around the world, from partners, from Save the Children offices. It includes data visualizations, reports, presentations, and then of course the IDELA tool itself. So if you really want to start understanding more about not what IDELA is and what it does, but what's coming out of all this research, I highly recommend you spend some time here. I am going to pause for a moment just to share in the chat box that link in case anyone wants to follow along with us online. I have to make sure I spell it right or get some feedback. There we go. All right. Two things I want to point out on this homepage. Number one is that up in the right-hand corner where there's the first red arrow, you'll see that there's a login button. So I want to emphasize that all of these screenshots that I took for this page of the PowerPoint, as well as subsequent slides, this all occurred when I was not logged into the website. So this is what a user could experience if you had just heard of IDELA and were checking out the website from Zimbabwe. This is what you would see. And obviously, if you do have a login for our website, you can do that and still access the community of practice. But I do want to emphasize, this is open to absolutely everyone. We want it to be open to the public. And number two, if you see that lower red arrow, that points to the connect button, which is how you're going to enter the community of practice. So when you click that connect button, you are brought onto this page, which is the home page for our community of practice. You get a little bit of text there explaining what the idea is in case you were not able to attend this webinar and you need a little bit of an introduction. And then you can see below the different discussion groups that are listed. The page is fairly simple, it's clean. We're trying to keep it that way and really focused on the discussions that are down there. Now, let me go back one moment. Each of these discussions I kind of think of as an umbrella. We, Fabiola and myself as the primary administrators of this site, have looked at the common questions that we see IDELA partners and IDELA users asking. And we have come up with these umbrella discussions that kind of group together those questions. And you can see there, we have one discussion about adaptation and translation, another about different geographic areas where IDELA is being used, and then there's specific questions about the tool. There's a few more down there. And we'll be adding to that as we feel that different questions need to be grouped or organized differently. But let's talk about what happens when you actually click on one of those groups and enter in. As I said, up on the top here are those discussions. That's what you see when you enter the community of practice page. And those, again, are the umbrellas. They're the massive discussion topics, discussion areas, excuse me. Then, if you click on one of those, so if you click, for example, on the first one, adaptation and translation, if we go down a level to topic, those two topics would then appear. Those topics sit under the header of the adaptation and translation discussion. And we can add, and you in turn can add new questions, posts, comments to those topics. So if you feel like you have a question to ask that has to do with adaptation and translation, you would enter that discussion, and you could either see what topics already exist or add a new topic of your own. So right now, as we've set it up for today's launch, there's two topics in there. You can see those. One is, do the items need to be adapted as well, or is translation enough? This is a very common question we get from IDELA users. And can I translate IDELA from the master English version? So if those are the type of things that you're already looking for, you can then click on one of those topics and see the actual discussion, the actual replies that are taking place for that particular topic. And that leads us down to that third step there, which is the reply phase. For this example, I took that topic, can I translate IDELA from the master English version? And I replied to it. And I think you can just see the text down there, and I say IDELA has been translated into many languages, and I provided links to the pages in our site where you can go see those translations. So these are the three tiers that the community of practice kind of sits on. Fabiola and myself will have that top level control where we can organize different discussions around broad themes. And then down at the topic level, we can ask questions, you can ask questions, we can get a new topic going within that thematic discussion. And then finally, there's the reply area where people can kind of banter back and forth. There can be multiple replies. And that's where we see a lot of conversation happening. I want to emphasize with these two red arrows that these are the two levels where you as users can interact with the site. You yourself can post a new topic, a new question, a new inquiry, and you can also reply to an existing topic. We will maintain the admin side of the discussion, but I just want to emphasize one more time, you guys have control over those other two sections. We'll be posting in there, other Save the Children ECD team members as well as research team members will be posting in there as well. We do hope it's going to be a lively, ongoing discussion, and we'll be monitoring it, of course, to promote certain topics. If we think someone's done a wonderful response to a question that kind of nails that answer, great, we'll bring it up there. And if a great discussion ensues on another topic and there's 20 replies under it, that's fantastic too, because it shows that there's a conversation going on. Now, how do you actually post? I can tell you what it looks like, but what does it actually mean to write in and put something new on this site? So you can see here that I am again in that adaptation and translation umbrella discussion, and within it we have two topics. Below that, if you were to be on this page and you scroll down, you would very quickly see that you can create a new topic in this area. And on the right, it shows you what else, what other boxes you need to complete. Very simple system. We do ask for your email. This is a security measure, but it's not saved. You won't receive emails from us. And you can very quickly type in a new topic for yourselves. This would again apply it would look almost identical if you were going to reply to an existing topic. The form would look absolutely the same, except it would say create a new reply. The other function I want to mention in here is the search function. While right now it doesn't look like we have hundreds of posts, we do hope that one day there are that many, and we realize weeding through that amount of content is quite a lot. If you need a kind of a quick question and answer, you want it to be fast. You need to move your team forward and get a quick response to your question. And so we've implemented a search function, and this is available on every single page, whether you're on the home page or you're replying to another comment. The search box is always there. And what this allows you to do is just to search a simple keyword to see any post where that has come up. So in the future, if you're working in Mali, you might type in Mali to see if anyone else has posted about IDELA use in that country. Or similarly, I typed the word translation into our search box recently, and I got the results that you can see on the bottom of the page. Our search engine categorizes results into two categories: those that have topics where that word is mentioned, and those that are areas where that word is found in replies, which is why you see it separated into two sections there in the results. But you could either from there join a topic and see what multiple posts have been done, or you could go straight maybe to a reply that has your answer in it. So that was a bit of a whirlwind tour, and I hope that this will get you excited about getting in there, seeing what other posts are already up, seeing what other discussions have been started, and potentially starting your own. I do highly recommend that you spend some time over the next few hours or days checking it out. But a few next steps for you in general. Number one, share the community of practice. I know that not all of our colleagues could be here today, all the different members of your team, and I hope that you will share this with them, whether this is the PowerPoint or the webinar or even just the link to the community of practice. I think that letting people know about this gives them the opportunity to check it out and see if it's a good fit for them. And I would love not just you, but your whole team to be aware of this as a resource as you use or investigate IDELA. Number two, try posting. I promise you're not going to break the system. We've tried. You're not going to mess anything up, and there are no stupid questions. There's only engagement and your opportunity to learn more about IDELA. Whether you're new, whether you're an existing user, whether you're thinking you might use it again for a new evaluation, I highly recommend just give it a try. It's not going to hurt anything, I promise. And number three, check back in. I know that maybe you're sitting here thinking, well, yeah, this sounds nice, but we just finished an evaluation. I don't really have a need for this right now. You might in the future. Check back in a few weeks. If you're just thinking about using IDELA and you decide a few months from now that you're in a study design phase and you are going to use it, go ahead. Check back in, see if it's relevant for you at that time. It may not be every day, but I hope that at some point during your use of IDELA, this can be a great connection point for you and for other users. And finally, let us know what you'd like to see. Fabiola mentioned this as well in her presentation. There's two ways that we're thinking that this will work. Number one, if we're seeing really, in terms of webinars, if we are seeing that a particular topic is coming up quite frequently within the community of practice, we're then going to generate a webinar based on that topic. And maybe that's about connecting people in certain regions so that they can learn from each other in more of a live format, like here on Zoom. Or maybe people are having a particularly hard time with sampling in their study, and they'd really like some advice on that and to hear from our technical experts. We'd be happy to design a webinar around sampling. Really, whatever this community deems, kind of important and necessary, we want to respond to that. Number two, the other way you can let us know what you'd like to see is by reaching out to us, either through the website, through our IDELA email address, which I'll be sharing, through my personal work email address. All of those different ways of reaching out and connecting with IDELA will enable us to improve this community of practice for you and for other users. So while you can post on topics and replies, maybe there's a different discussion that we need to initiate from the admin end, and we'd be more than happy to do that. We do want to hear from you. This is a really fluid, dynamic system, and it only works if we're helping to run it, but you're also helping to let us know what content you need to see up there. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce our panelists in one moment, but I also want to put up another link here just for those. One moment, I just want to make sure I get this right. There we go. And there's the community of practice link. I just shared it in the chat box. If you're a visual person, you want to check it out now, go ahead. But more importantly, copy that and save that for later so you can explore it later in the day. All right, I am very excited after getting through the details and the logistics portion. I'm very excited to introduce the other individuals that you've been seeing on your screen for the last few minutes. I'm going to introduce them, each of them individually, and give them a few moments to introduce themselves and talk about their work and their connection to IDELA. First, I want to introduce Mitzi Hanold. She is a senior coordinator of education programs for Food for the Hungry. Food for the Hungry is using IDELA in multiple countries, and I would love to go on and on about where that is, but I'm going to leave that to Mitzi.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. So thanks to Franny and Fabiola for organizing this webinar, and it's great to be a part of it and to be a user of IDELA. So as I said, my name is Mitzi Hanold. I work for Food for the Hungry. We are an international relief and development organization working in 21 countries and have been working since 1971. So education is one of our key intervention areas, and starting in 2017, we signed an MOU with Save the Children to begin using IDELA as assessment to help us better understand childhood performance. So looking at the early childhood piece, kind of as the beginning steps to measuring childhood performance for our programs. So to date, we've gathered data for 6 countries, 3 in Latin America and the Caribbean, 2 in Africa, and 1 in Asia. And hopefully we'll add a few more countries before the end of the year. So that's been very exciting. Just a bit about how we've used IDELA. So currently, since it's newly introduced, it's a bit like a baseline for our community projects. And we combine it with, we use IDELA to interview children 3.5 to 6.5 years of age. We also use another assessment to look at children 7 to 15. And we also interview caregivers to find out how their interactions with their children and how the home environment is supportive of childhood learning. So all these 3 pieces are fitting together and giving us a really good understanding of how children are doing. And the tool is great, and it's given us information we haven't had in the past, so we've had a very good experience with it. So I'll leave it at that and free to answer other questions as they come up. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitzi. That's fantastic. And I would next like to introduce Monique Abembe, who works with Save the Children International in Rwanda. She's based in Kigali. Monique is a senior research and evaluation specialist, and she's worked in Eastern and Central Africa, both with IDELA for Save the Children, as well as for partners introducing new organizations to the tool. Monique?
Thank you very much, Franny. Thank you for short introduction on me. As you said, I'm Monica Imai. I work for Save the Children as Senior Research and Evaluation Specialist. I'm a trainer on IDELA tool. Briefly, Rwanda has been using IDELA tool multiple times. For the first time, we used IDELA tool in 2014 with a project on early literacy and math initiative. That time it was in its initial development phases. In different studies that we conducted, the findings helped us in informing advocacy and policy efforts around the expansion of high-quality early childhood education services in Rwanda in terms of national curricula, in terms of influencing training modules of pre-primary teachers. We are working with other partner organizations. Among us, there is Food for the Hungry, and Better World, and VSO, Voluntary Services Overseas. So it is a good tool that we have used. We interview children and parents to look at the equity and how that parents, they help the children in their learning development at early ages. Not only that, we also work with the government, show them how well we can use this IDELA tool, so that maybe just even that's in some other national studies that's looking at the early learning development of children, they can still use this IDELA tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. I appreciate that introduction and that little more in-depth into what's going on in Rwanda.
Yes.
Our third panelist is Lottie Capstick. She is a data and analytics manager for Rising Academy Network. She's specifically based in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Lottie?
Thank you very much, Franny. Hi to everybody. As Franny mentioned, my name is Lottie. I work as the Data and Analytics Manager for Rising Academy Network. Rising Academy is operational in both Liberia and in Sierra Leone. In Liberia, we operate a network of 29 schools across the country, and this is part of the Partnership Schools for Liberia initiative, or the PSL initiative, which is a public-private initiative along with the Liberian Ministry of Education. So here we're responsible for the day-to-day management of the schools, whether that's training, curriculum development, and just overall school monitoring. And then in Sierra Leone, we operate a network of 10 low-cost schools. Here our main focus is to provide quality education at an affordable cost, and that runs from the nursery right up to senior secondary level. In terms of our use of IDELA, last year we piloted IDELA in our schools in Liberia. Mainly we wanted to see how it worked in the Liberian context. We also wanted to get used to using the tool, and then also to try and get an insight into our early childhood population. And the pilot worked really well. We were very, very happy with how the data came in. And so for this year, we're now using IDELA again across our 29 schools in Liberia. Here we're using the assessments 3 times a year across about a 25% sample of our students, with an even split of boys and girls. And then we're also using IDELA in Sierra Leone, again, assessing our children 3 times a year. And so here we're mainly trying to capture more insight into our early childhood population, maybe trying to draw some comparisons between our Sierra Leone and Liberian students, and then also kind of looking at where we're making learning gains, whether there's any gender gaps emerging, just trying to get a bit more of an insight into where our students are working. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now, I want to jump in here for a moment. I was going to save this till the end, but I think this would be good here. I'm going to poll our audience. Panelists, I don't think it's fair that they've been introduced to you, but you don't know who's listening. So I want to find out a little bit more about who has joined us today. I'm going to put a poll up for all of you attendees. And now my research colleagues are going to fault me here because I don't think I have the right multiple choice answers for all of them, but please find the best fit for yourselves. Panelists, I apologize, you're not able to vote. It's just the attendees. All right, about 60% have voted. Does anyone else want to weigh in? %65%. All right, I'm going to take it down in a moment. Can we get to 75? All right. Now, panelists, you cannot see this poll. Is that correct? No. Okay, then I'm going to read these answers out aloud so that you know what's going on. I asked our audience, tell us about your work or knowledge of IDELA. 10% of our audience said, I used IDELA in the past, but I'm not currently using it. 20% of our audience said, I'm currently using IDELA in my work. 16% of the audience said, I'm exploring IDELA for future use. Another 16% said, I don't use IDELA, but I know about it and I want to learn more. And 37%, wow, I'm actually surprised by this, 37% said, I'm completely new to IDELA. All right, so yeah, I will share that with you afterwards as well. I know that's hard to catch just reading it out loud, but we have a fairly even spread. Everyone who's used IDELA and who has quite a bit of experience down to brand new. All right, oh, I can share results. There we go. Great. Fabiola, I'm going to turn it back over to you to engage a little bit more with our panelists.
Sure, thanks, Franny. Well, now that everyone has learned a little bit more about our panelists and the great work they're doing, I think we'd like to hear more from you three, from our panelists, as to what are the benefits of something like the community of practice that you see. Some immediate benefits in terms of knowledge sharing and such. And you're all on mute, so if you're trying to say something, you're on mute.
I can start. This is Mitzi. I mean, I think for me and for our education team, partnering with Save the Children for the use of IDELA is a great way to share resources, not to recreate the wheel as it is. So having this community of practice, likewise, we can share experiences across many different organizations, many different countries, and I think have stronger programs individually, but also across the globe for early childhood development. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I think always you should seek more information from others who know more than you do. So I think a community of practice is a great way to do that, to build capacity. So yeah, that's my biggest thing.
Okay. Anybody else want to say or add anything to that?
Yeah, just to add into what Mitzi said, I completely agree with her in terms of reinventing the wheel. You know, I've worked in research now for 6-7 years across West Africa, and definitely over the past couple of years, I've realized that implementing student assessments and implementing them well is very difficult. You know, it takes a lot of attention to detail to make sure that the data you're getting in is of very good quality. And so I certainly think if the forum of being able to share your experiences will be hugely beneficial, not only to those who have already used IDELA in the past, but to new people as well. And one thing that I would especially be interested in doing is kind of also looking into how we're interpreting the results from IDELA. So at the moment, we've now been using it for a couple of years, and we're kind of at a stage now where we're thinking about the so what, i.e. what are our results actually telling us about our students? And so I think, again, this forum could be an excellent way of thinking about, okay, what would we expect a student to be performing at a certain age? You know, IDELA is full of very different tasks throughout, and so whether we would expect a 3-year-old to be able to draw the triangle, or whether they should be more at age 4 or 5 to be able to do that. I think, again, like to be able to get a better sense of the milestones would be a really, really, really helpful thing for us.
Wonderful.
Yes, I can even add some. Thank you. That's to complement my colleagues. That's through this good forum that will help us, just different people, to communicate one another, to share different experience that we had and different activities that we had with, to maybe in data collection, training of emeriters, how you can administer the IDELA tool. And as you know, for now, IDELA is in English, but and it is being used in different contexts. So with this community of practice, we can connect one another and share how we have been able to adapt it. In context, for example, if that's in East Africa, in this region, I can like communicate with other neighborhood, other countries, to see how that we can even adapt. We can adapt it in very good way. And also not only that, we can even just share lessons learned, challenges that we meet, even success. And also we can learn how that we can even use the findings to better influence and advocate for different implementation activities ongoing in our countries. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And for Mitzi and Lottie, you both have experience using IDELA with the organizations that you are with, using IDELA across multiple countries. So how would you see something like this supporting cross-country teams?
Shall I go first, Mitzi? Yeah, I mean, I think working in different countries is quite a big challenge and something you really need to think through before you actually start with the research. Certainly, Liberia and Sierra Leone are fairly similar in terms of both English speaking, they're bordering countries and things like that. But still, the context in which we're working in is incredibly different. Our schools in Liberia are, some of them are about a 2-hour drive away from the capital city. Some take 2 days to reach. And so, you know, the students that you meet there are very, very different compared to our students in Freetown, who are quite, you know, they've grown up in a very urban environment. And so I guess in terms of how the community of practice again can help with that, I guess it's just again being able to share your experiences of working across these countries. Again, I really like the idea of being able to share our results or share what worked for us, moving across from one country to another country, and the things that maybe you need to tailor and adapt depending on the environment that you're working in.
Great.
Okay, so repeat your question once more so I get it.
Yeah, so I mean, we know that both you and Lottie are using IDELA in multiple countries. So my question is more as to how could something like the community of practice support these cross-country teams using IDELA?
I think it's, in some ways, you don't want to compare too many countries, like one to the other. But you also, I've seen, I think we've done 6 so far, there are some similarities. Like there's some domains that are low in many countries, like the social-emotional domain we found pretty much one of the lowest domains across all of our countries. So learning from other countries, kind of what types of interventions they might be doing is a great way for other countries to brainstorm also how they might do those particular interventions. I think just sharing across countries is also can be eye-opening to sometimes you can't see your own culture or your own drawbacks, but when you hear it from a different country, it makes things more clear. So in some ways, I don't want to compare results because you don't want to say, wow, they were 20% better than we were. But I do think we can learn from one another in common problems among children. And just the whole, oh, they've done this very unique intervention. We could do something like that, but in a different way, I think is also very useful. So I think in the community of practice, that could be very helpful just to have a whole spread of cultures and ideas.
Great, thank you. And Monique, I know you have a lot of experience onboarding new IDELA users in the region and elsewhere. So I want to hear from you in terms, and I think it would be really helpful for the community of practice or the for the users to hear how could the community of practice be helpful to new users?
Yes, thank you very much. This community of practice, it will help that new users to connect with like other experts in IDELA tool who have like used it for many years with much experience with it. So whenever they are stuck or have any problem, they can just share on that discussion part and learn from one another. As I said, we can even like share with others the challenges that we meet administering with this IDELA tool, the success that we made with, like, as I said, some adaptations. If that's when they will be able to start using this IDELA tool, they will find that there are some parts where that you can adapt it using your context, depending on our country context. So, and even that we can share that. We can share how we adapted IDELA tool based on our context. Not only that, we can even share how we can communicate. We can communicate on how just we can like those IDELA tools can be administered in urban and rural areas, depending on which country you're in which region you are. So I think not only new users, even how just region or geographical region are located, we can even just learn from one another. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And last question to all of you: are there other ways that the community of practice can be useful to those who have used IDELA? I believe Franny said we have 10% that have used it but not currently using it now, or for the 20% that are currently using IDELA. Yeah, so just to reiterate, is there other ways that the community of practice can be used or can be helpful to these different groups?
I guess for those starting afresh who haven't used IDELA at all, I think it's going to be very, 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 very helpful. You know, just in terms of being able to say, oh guys, what do I do about this, or what happens in this task? You know, you have the materials there, but just to be able to put out questions there to a community that are very used to doing implementing this assessment will be really helpful along all of the stages, whether it's training, your sampling, actually doing the implementation, and then running through to your analysis. For those already, I guess, familiar and using IDELA, I think it'll be a really good opportunity for us to all learn from each other. I'm sure, even though we're still following the same guidelines, we're probably implementing things in different ways, or I've certainly found different small techniques about ordering your field manuals and things like that that have really saved time in the field and to make field work as effective and quick but as thorough as possible. And so I just think it's going to be a great opportunity for us to all learn from each other.
Adding to what Lottie mentioned, there's so many different pieces. There's the data person who wants to know, what do you do with the data? How do you analyze it? We use ODK. I think there's other software is it being used, so even the software piece of it. The program person who wants to know what types of interventions do we do with this, the person interested in trend data. So I think there's lots of different areas where someone could be interested, and hopefully the community of practice can speak to each one of those areas to give us different ideas. Yeah.
Great. All right. And
I actually had a question for Monique, following up on something you said earlier, and I think this is, it's about adaptation, and because that was already a frequently asked question that I had put up on the community of practice for the launch, and then Monique having to bring it up in her statement earlier. I think, Monique, would you be able to comment a little bit more on what adaptation is in terms of IDELA? I think if it's already coming up this much, I'd love particularly for the new users on our website, or excuse me, on the call who are not current IDELA users. Could you explain a little bit more about what adaptation means for IDELA, and maybe give an example of what you've done? What does adaptation look like in the context you've worked in?
Okay, thank you very much. There's some items that which are an IDELA tool, for example, which seem to be somehow more a bit Western, not like in African context. Like, for example, in terms of different pictures that like you can use, which are under social emotional development part. So, for example, in that part we used, for example, I can just like, for example, if you want to show a child like a picture of a child who is crying. So I remember that in the IDELA tool, the global one, there is a child who has long hair and who looks, even the color is not the same. So we say that better maybe just to find a picture with a short hair like mine, and that's so you see, there's some other adaptation that you can use depending on your context, even that's, as I said, even that sometimes you consider there is much difference between rural and urban area. So, and sometimes when that's we want like to administer IDELA tool in urban area, there are also other items that we change accordingly. So there are different items. Yes, thank you. And also there's something else that I like to mention. It's maybe about puzzle. That's about puzzle. So for example, in pilot, we have found that, for example, having 5 pieces, it was really difficult for a child like to link the 5 pieces or the 6 pieces. So depending on pilot, depending on the results, so we have been able to communicate with IDELA expert from Save the Children research team, and that's based on those contexts. Then we sometimes we like use 5 pieces instead of 6 pieces. So those are all parts of in terms of adaptation. So it depends, and again, we do not like change them as we want. We always work hand in hand with education expert specialists, so that that angle of how that we can even like link our research in that's with like the field, with the implementation or the intervention that we are like conducting our research for. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have to take notes from the webinar and put them up on the site, or ask you to make a post on the community of practice now. That was a perfect answer. That was great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We do have a question from Prosenjit, who is one of our attendees today. He asks, and I'll state the question, and then Fabiola, I might send this one to you actually. But this is exactly the type of question that we hope to get on the community of practice and that others can learn from as well. And Prosenjit asks, if we administer IDELA with children, then are we required to administer the caregiver tool with the parents of those selected children? Fabiola, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the short answer is no. You are not required. So to say, and the panelists can weigh on this. But as Franny mentioned, those are excellent questions that that we would love to see on the community of practice. So please bring your questions to the community of practice.
Fabiola, would you mind explaining a little bit for those who might be new what the caregiver tool is? Is it a different tool than IDELA?
Oh,
sure. Is it the same?
Sure. So when we talk about the IDELA tool, we refer to the direct assessment, which is administered to the child. So this is the enumerator sits down with the child and plays a series of games. We like to call them games because that's exactly what children are doing. They're having fun and they're playing games. And then we have the caregiver questionnaire, which is caregivers are sat down and asked a series of questions regarding their home environment, and there's a couple of other items regarding, you know, what kind of resources are available for children in the home. So typically IDELA users use both to collect some data as to what children, where are they in the sense of their development through direct assessment, but also to get more information as to what their home environments look like.
Great, thanks, Fabiola.
Mm-hmm.
This is your last chance to make a quick announcement. Your last chance. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them right there in the chat box. We'd be happy to take them, and you might even see it featured on the community of practice later today. We'll just give a minute, see if anyone has any questions or comments for us.
We just received a comment. This is so helpful. I'm glad. Thank you.
Great. If it's helpful now, I'm so excited to see what the next few months and even weeks bring, because it's only going to get filled with more content and more responses. So we're very excited. Right now, Fabiola and I have our name on a lot of posts in there. We need some more diversity. Sarah is typing in a question. I'm just going to let her finish. Fabiola, do you want to take that question?
I think this would be a really great question for our panelists. Are Mitzi, Monique, and Lottie, are you all able to see the question that was posted?
I'll read it out for anyone who's on the phone joining us not visually. One of our colleagues asked, I have a question about software. I know that there are zip files for IDELA for Kobo, but is it possible to translate these versions?
Yes, the zipped folder, that file is for IDELA. For the Kobo toolbox, it is online data collection, where just you can use digital devices instead of using like hard copies questionnaires. So yes, there is option where just in those zipped files, if just you have the XLS form, where you can add a colon, and that colon just you can just put your translated version corresponding to the same questions in English. So in that zipped file, there is one XLS where there are different questions of different items. So you can create one, you can insert one column and then put your language, which has all the translated items in the language that you want to use. So yes, it is possible to translate those versions. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. All right, we have another question. All right, so we have a few things. Number one, we have another question that you might have seen from Prasenjit, and that's a more detailed question about IDELA use and results. So we're actually going to post that on the community of practice and get you a more thorough answer than we can do on the fly right now. And Sarah actually says that she has a couple others, but she's going to post them in the community of practice. So this is a perfect segue, I think, to say that we're not going to do any more Q&A on the call. But we hope that we will see you all this engaged and this active on the community of practice. I'm going to send out a link right now to all of you. Again, to reiterate that how you can get to our community of practice. It is quite simple. It's idela-network.org/community-of-practice. And again, if you go to our homepage of our website, that connect button up in the right-hand corner will take you right there. Fabiola, any closing comments?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. No, but thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate the time that you took to attend this webinar. We hope it was useful for you. And thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their experiences and their knowledge. I'm pretty sure that everyone really, really very much appreciated that. So thank you so much.
Thank you all again to our panelists who are joining from the different corners of the world and different time zones. We greatly appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you again, maybe on future webinars, but definitely on the community of practice. Thank you.